Hello, welcome to my dish presentation. So today I'm going to be making a dish using nearly all local ingredients. Today I'm making a lamb rump with spinach, peas and mint puree, Cheshire potatoes which have been roasted and a grilled asparagus. The ingredients I'm going to show you now have all been bought from Baker Market. The ingredients were bought about 3 days ago and kept refrigerated, so all to keep fresh. Firstly, I've got my asparagus tips, my mint, and lastly, Cheshire potatoes. Okay, so firstly I'm going to be using Cheshire potatoes. I've picked Cheshire potatoes due to how local they are to Buxton. It fits in well with the main dish theme I've got of locality. Secondly, I've picked Cheshire potatoes due to how versatile they are. So asparagus. I've chosen asparagus for this dish due to its heavy flavour it's got. Now I'm using a lot of beige foods today, so I feel asparagus as an element will have quite a good contrast between the rest. Alongside this, I feel its grassiness and almost slight bitterness will go well with the mint, the spinach mint pea puree and the lamb I'm going to create. Okay, so last three ingredients. Now, the mint I was able to acquire from Baker Market, so local ingredient again, but unfortunately the peas and the spinach I did struggle with. So I bought these both from a supermarket, as fresh as I could, but still they don't fit the local theme, so that's something I would change in the future for this dish. But going forward, I've chosen these three ingredients for the flavours and how they act together, along with the colour. So I'm going to make a puree out of these three ingredients. Traditionally, spinach and peas go quite well as in a puree, but I decided to add mint into the works in order to help it go better with the lamb I'm going to create. Because as you know, mint and lamb are good together. Before I start the video, I washed all the veg and it's now ready to use. So the main techniques I'll be showcasing today will be some knife skills by filleting the lamb, then going on to use the sous vide machine, and then making a puree out of the ingredients I've got here, alongside, lastly, grilling the Cheshire potatoes and asparagus. So first things first, I'm going to start by preheating the sous vide machine. So first I'm going to need to preheat up the sous vide machine. So first I'll turn the sous vide machine on and preheat it to about 63 degrees Celsius. I'm then going to set the time for 45 minutes on the sous vide machine. And now wait for that to preheat. While the sous vide is heating up, I've decided to take out the lamb in order to let it get to room temperature. By doing this, it allows the meat to be less tense and ultimately more moist when we come to cook it. So the type of cut I'm using today is rump, but it can also be known as a chuck. I bought this from a local Derbyshire butcher's. After speaking to the butcher informed me that the lamb had been reared in Bakewell, so perfectly fitting with my local theme I have with this dish. So as you can see, the rump I've bought still has butcher's strand on it in order to keep it together. Now the first thing I'm going to do is take that off. And into the raised bin it goes. So now here we have a full rolled out lamb rump. So first things first, I'm going to take off this layer of skin and fat underneath the joint. Like so, and into the race bag it goes. So now the skin's off, I'm going to portion it into a single steak. So have this big almost chuck end at the side. I'm going to slice that down, put it to one side. After that, you should be left over with a single almost steaklet of lamb rump. So now for my lamb's all nice and seasoned, I'm going to go and prepare it to be put in a sous vide. Now, I don't have any airtight bags on me or any methods to airtight this in general. So the method I'm going to use is just like the method you use in a chicken roulade. So this method is wrapping it tightly in cling film and twisting it on both ends and tying it in order to remove any air. Essentially making it airtight like any food saver bag would. Now generally in the future I would use a food saver bag on a piece like this and the machine has a vacuum seal. But as we don't have one today, I will be using cling film method. Now with this getting in a sous vide, I want to gently put a light amount of olive oil on it. Rub that in on both sides. For this method, you're going to need some cling film. So firstly, I grab a generous amount. Now I'm going to be adding a few sprigs of thyme on my lamb here, and we'll just infuse it with a little bit of nice herbal flavour. Now we've got that nicely wrapped up like this. What we want to do is press it down, take out any air, and begin turning it on its sides. Almost make it become like a sausage shape. Okay. Not too tightly though, because you don't want it to come out as a pure sausage. And then tie off the ends. And there you have an airtight food safe bag, perfect for use in a sous vide machine. So now our sous vide machine has reached 63 degrees Celsius and it's time to put the lamb rump in. And in 45 minutes time, this will be ready to take out. So while the sous vide is on and the lamb is cooking, I'm now going to get on with the Cheshire potatoes and the asparagus. So simply for the asparagus, I'm going to be shortening the ends so we're left with asparagus tips. And as to remind, the veg has been washed beforehand. So for the Cheshire potatoes, now I'm going to actually not cook these at all, I'm going to keep them whole. The reason for this is because they're quite small already, and alongside that, I feel keeping them whole will look more aesthetically pleasing to the plate and almost more traditional. So my plan for these potatoes are to boil them until tender. Once tender, I'm going to give them to a hot pan to saute them to give them a nice crust, and then put them straight into a hot or preheated oven. So now we have boiling water. I'm going to bring the boil to a simmer. Done now, I'm going to season the water and then add the Cheshire potatoes. So now at this point in time, the Cheshire potatoes are now fork tender and ready to be transferred to a pan. I'm now going to put on the heat on the cast iron skillet and put it on high heat in order to have a pan nice and hot, ready for potatoes to go in. Now the pan has reached high heat, I'm going to add about a teaspoon of butter. And in order to prevent the butter from burning, I'm then going to add a small drop of oil. And that's what you want to hear. You want to hear that nice sizzling sound as soon as you put them in the pan. That's when you know your pan's hot enough. Now I don't want to move these potatoes around too much. I want to let them do the thing and be able to just cook on their own, giving them a nice beautiful crust. If I was to turn them now, I'll be destroying any crust being created between the pan and the potatoes. Now using some tongs, I'm just going to flip the Cheshire potatoes, and as you can see, a beautiful brown crust is growing on top. Now I've got a nice brown coating on each side. I'm going to add a little bit of seasoning of salt. Just move them around in that seasoning to get them all covered. Once that's done, I'm going to transfer it into a pan, turn off the heat on the cast iron, and I'm going to transfer them into a preheated oven at 200 degrees Celsius. Okay, so the Cheshire potatoes have been in the oven for maybe about 10 to 15 minutes now, and they're nearly finished. So before I finish, I'm going to put in the grilled asparagus, and just let that char and sit there on a high heat and cook until it's tender. Okay, so I've just taken the lamb out of the sous vide. I'm going to take off the herbs at the thyme I put on, and I'm just going to let it sit now for about 5-10 minutes. That allows it to stay juicy so the juices don't pour out. I'm going to wrap it in foil so to keep it warm, and I'll keep it on some heat. I'm going to go finish the Cheshire potatoes and the asparagus, and then once that's all finished we can start on the pea and spinach puree, and finally we'll brown the lamb in the cast iron pan. Okay, so the Cheshire potatoes are now done, and I'm just going to take them out of the oven and check them with a fork. The fork goes right through, and that shows they're tender and ready to eat. So now I'm going to make the pea, mint and spinach puree, but while I'm making that I want to keep the rest of my ingredients warm. So what I've done is I've turned the heat lamp on in my top oven, and I'm just going to put them all in a tray and into the oven. So next I'm going to make a spinach, pea and mint puree. Now this is quite a simple and easy recipe to make. All I need to do to start is by melting some butter in a pan. Just melt it down. Be careful not to let it burn by keeping it off the heat. Once the butter's melted, I'm going to add a handful of spinach to the mix. Now this may look like a lot, but spinach quickly wilts and shrinks down. Once the spinach is wilted and shrunk down a considerable amount, we want to add the peas. I'm just going to cook those maybe about 30 seconds in the butter, just to give them flavour. After about 30 seconds, we're going to add some water, just enough to cover the peas and spinach. Let this boil, then let it simmer for about 5 minutes, or until it's soft enough to be made into a puree. Okay, so our puree has been on a simmer for maybe about 5 minutes now, and we're ready to go drain it. Now in my food processor, I'm going to add the cooked spinach and peas. I'm going to add a little bit of water, just to help it make it into a paste. It's time to blend. Now once I've blended up slightly, I'm going to add a few leaves of mint. Not the stalks, just the leaves. Just to give it a nice mild mint flavour. I haven't cooked the mint, as I wanted to keep it as fresh a flavour as I could. And almost grassy. To really give into that flavour and that feel of a Peak District. I've got a nice green puree there, but that's not the final step. So next I'm going to strain it through a fine strainer in order to make it smooth as possible. So at this step, in order to get the puree nice and smooth, I'm going to put it through a fine strainer and just push it with the back of a metal spoon to push it all through the strainer and keep any big bits out. With the back of a spoon you can push it out, and as you can see it comes out nice and smooth without those big chunky bits we're getting left over. And after that you should be left over with a nice beautiful thick green puree. Depending on how smooth you want it, you can strain it multiple times, but I'm happy with the consistency I've achieved here. So at this point in the recipe, I've got the puree in a small saucepan on a low heat, just to keep it warm while we're cooking the lamb. Now I've turned up the heat on the cast iron to about medium high. I'm just letting that heat up for a bit. Now due to the lamb already being cooked through the sous vide, we only want to have the lamb in for maybe about a minute on each side at tops. And that's what we're going to hear, that nice sizzle when it's adding to the pan. Now at this point I'm just going to leave it there and just let it do its own thing. A bit of butter underneath, a little bit of oil. Let's turn it around now. It's got a beautiful brown crust we've formed. And with that, our lamb rump's ready to take out the pan. So if the lamb rested for maybe 2 minutes odd, I'm going to cut into the lamb into about 4 or 5 slices. Have it ready to be plated. And as you can see, the lamb came out in a beautiful pink. So now for plating on my dish, I want to give the dish quite a lot of height. So I'm going to experiment now with the potatoes and the rump and see where I can then add the asparagus and the puree. The end design I went for created height within my food and created a quite compact space, allowing me to dot puree around the plate. Food's managed to keep hot by I heated the plate in the microwave with drops of water on it and managed to keep it warm. The lot of use of The high use of green, I felt, helped represent the Derby and show its local colours and natural flavours.